In this clip, we are going to cover how artillery units operate. We begin with the basic concept that an artillery unit can fire into an adjacent hex just like a maneuver unit. This is termed direct fire. It can also project its fire beyond adjacent hexes, out a number of hexes equal to its printed range, which is the middle number at the bottom of the unit counter under the range dome. So in this case, this artillery unit can execute indirect fire against any target hex in the gray zone that it is not adjacent to. Generally, an artillery unit can execute direct fire into an adjacent hex each time an opportunity comes up in the form of infiltration fire, defensive fire, or retreat fire, all options that occur when an enemy unit moves next to a friendly artillery unit. What an artillery unit cannot do is employ direct fire to participate in an offensive fire combat or a strike, because modern artillery systems are not designed to function as assault guns. Otherwise, there is no limit to the number of times an artillery unit can execute direct fire in a single turn. Indirect fire occurs when an artillery unit fires at a target hex that is not adjacent. Generally, each artillery unit can conduct indirect fire at most once per turn, and then only in response to a fire call from a friendly headquarters in its chain of command. However, an artillery unit can use indirect fire to participate in any type of strike or fire combat. An HQ can only make a fire call to an artillery unit if the unit is in the HQ's artillery pool. An artillery unit has to meet 3 conditions to be included in an HQ's artillery pool. It needs to belong to the same formation as the headquarters unit that is making the fire call, or to any formation in its chain of command, meaning superior or subordinate. It also needs to be within the command range of the calling headquarters. Finally, it needs to be eligible to execute indirect fire, meaning it is not disrupted, it is not adjacent to an enemy unit, and it does not bear a fired marker. An HQ can have any number of artillery units in its artillery pool, and an artillery unit can be in the artillery pool of multiple friendly headquarters simultaneously if it meets the 3 conditions for each of them. An artillery unit drops out of a headquarters artillery pool whenever it fails to meet these 3 conditions. When a headquarters unit makes a fire call, it can call on any artillery unit in its artillery pool, up to the limit on the number of artillery units that are allowed by the friendly fire support chart for whatever the current action is. Let's look at this in practice. In this example, the U.S. 2nd Brigade headquarters is in command range of this unit from its division base, and it is also in command range of these 2 units from its corps base. However, the division base unit is fired, so it can't be included. This leaves the 2nd Brigade headquarters with an artillery pool of these 2 corps units. Moving on to the 36th Panzer Brigade headquarters, which is here. It is within command range and also in the chain of command for its own organic brigade artillery unit, for the 3 artillery units belonging to its division base, and also the 2 artillery units belonging to its corps. However, a NATO headquarters is generally barred from including units of a different nationality in its artillery pool. There are 2 exceptions where such transnational inclusion is possible. A non-U.S. headquarters can include U.S. corps artillery units in its artillery pool when it is making a fire call for a strike or an offensive fire call during a friendly assault operation, because these are the 2 occasions when there is sufficient time to plan for such transnational coordination. The 36th Brigade headquarters is in command range of the 34th Organic Artillery Unit here. However, it is not in the chain of command for that unit. That belongs to a different brigade, so it cannot include that unit in its artillery pool. This leaves the 36th Panzer Brigade headquarters with 4 units in its artillery pool, here, 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 and here, and the possibility of adding 2 more units in the event that it is conducting a strike or supporting a friendly assault operation. Moving on to the division main for the 12th Panzer, which is this headquarters here, its artillery pool looks identical to the artillery pool for the 36th Panzer Brigade headquarters for the exact same reasons, with the sole exception that it can also include the Organic Artillery Battalion from the 34th Panzer, because it is superior to that unit as well. All right, moving on from artillery pools, let's talk a little bit about a fire call. An artillery unit cannot execute indirect fire unless it is responding to a fire call. During the strike segment of a friendly activation cycle, any active headquarters can make 1 fire call to up to 2 artillery units for each strike it wishes to conduct. During a friendly hasty attack operation, headquarters can make 1 fire call to 1 friendly artillery unit during the offensive fire call step. During a friendly assault operation, headquarters can make 1 fire call to up to 2 friendly artillery units during the offensive fire call step. These same limits apply when headquarters makes a fire call during the defensive fire call step of an enemy hasty attack or assault operation, i.e. 1 artillery unit can be called during an enemy hasty attack and 2 artillery units can be called during an enemy assault. Finally, any headquarters can make an unlimited number of fire calls to 1 artillery unit at a time during a counter-battery fire cycle. We have another video clip that covers counter-battery fire cycles. Whenever an artillery unit fires for any reason, it immediately receives a fired marker. Once it bears a fired marker, it can still execute direct fire into an adjacent hex, but it cannot execute indirect fire for the remainder of the turn. It does not matter whether it received that fired marker for executing direct fire or indirect fire. Once it has it, it's barred from any further indirect fire. All right, let's talk about how artillery units move and fire. Artillery units are only allowed to conduct march operations. This means that an artillery unit will always move during its own march operation, which has no fire segment, and therefore it will always fire at some other point in time, either during a friendly strike segment or during a friendly or enemy operation that is being conducted by other units. A unit can conduct its march operation before it fires or after it fires. Accordingly, bearing a fired marker has no impact on an artillery unit's ability to move. All right, let's talk about artillery units actually firing in combat. An artillery unit calculates its basic fire strength exactly like a maneuver unit by multiplying its printed attack strength by the number of steps it contains. So in this case, this unit would have a basic fire strength of 9, 3 times 3, and this rocket artillery unit here would have a basic fire strength of 8 because it's 4 times 2. This strength is then further modified by the fire effects that are shown on the fire effects chart. It's important to note that the fire effects chart contains 2 columns in each section, one for direct fire by artillery units and one for indirect fire by artillery units. Artillery units can attack a target hex alone or in combination with other friendly units. When combining with other friendly units, an artillery unit participates by simply adding its modified fire strength to the total fire strength for the combat, after which the standard division by 2 would apply. Rocket artillery units, and this is the only rocket artillery unit in view except for this U.S. rocket artillery unit over here, have a unique restriction. They can only be called to participate in strikes and counter-battery fire strikes. They can never participate in a fire combat during a friendly or enemy operation. This restriction reflects the fact that rocket artillery salvos have a high rate of dispersion, so they are accurate enough for bombardment, but they are not accurate enough to use in close proximity to friendly troops when they are actually engaging the enemy. Rocket artillery units are subject to a second restriction, which is they cannot be used to fire against a target in an adjacent hex rockets had a minimum arming distance, and this essentially made them ineffective in a direct fire role. This has a second implication, which is that rocket artillery units have no field of fire into adjacent hexes, and therefore they have no zones of control. Case 4.1.2.3 in the rules shows all rocket artillery units in the game. To see examples of artillery units in action, please refer to the video clips for hasty attack and assault operations, and the video clips for fire strikes, ADM strikes, gas strikes, and counter-battery fire cycles.